welcome to this episode of The Gateway. I'm C.L. Thomas, your host, and we're live broadcast from United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. And my guest tonight is a special friend who I met on a journey through Romania, Raven Wolfe, the Desert Witch. She's a medium and a pet psychic from the Los Angeles area. And tonight we're going to talk about the Akashic Records. I'm really excited to have her on. She's such a beautiful soul. Raven, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see you again. It's been forever.
I know, I feel like you were living in Arizona and you moved, and we just kind of lost contact over the last few months from being so busy.
Yeah, life just gets a little bit busy and good changes and all the good vibes happen. So, yeah.
You have a lot going on. So, first, before we get into all of this, there's so much to talk about. You're a pet psychic. You know a lot about the Akashic Records, which I can't wait to get into. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a collective of all the thoughts and actions in life so the person lives from the past, future, and present. It's really interesting. Raven, how did you get into this?
Well, I first started getting into mediumship when I was really young. When I was in junior high, there was an unfortunate circumstance where a young lady passed away, and I started seeing the dead afterwards, and it kind of opened my eyes to all the other spirits that were around, both human and pet and other worldly beings. So that kind of cracked open the entire journey of learning about all of this and then being able to help others.
And so you were very young when you realized that you were a medium. How was that for you? I have to ask all mediums this question because it's so different across the board with everybody.
Well, I grew up in a very traditional Christian home. And so having these kinds of experiences wasn't something that I was accustomed to. And so in the beginning, it was pretty rough just because when you're raised in a tradition where you don't have a systematic belief system of openness in that regard, it can be very confusing. And
Mhm.
different ghosts and different beings and otherworldly things will appear in different ways. And as a young child, that can be either very traumatic or extremely inspiring. And for me, it was a little bit of both. But it's what instigated me to just go down the path and the journey that I decided to go on to be where I'm at today.
So I'm a little bit curious about the pet psychic stuff. How did you know that you can communicate with animals using mediumship? And
I
how
think
does this
since
work?
I think since I was a really young child, I have always had a connection to animals. They've always come up to me. And one day I was sitting at home with my dog Bosco at the time. And I was just sitting with him, and all of a sudden he was staring at me really intensely. And I was like, well, if I can see other beings and other types of things, why couldn't I communicate with pets? And so I sat down with him and I meditated, and there was this energetic connection that just opened the gateway to where I was able to understand what his needs were. And it's interesting because once you start talking with pets, it never stops. No matter where you go, you can be in nature, you can be at home. It's a nonstop thing. But the great thing about that is that I've been able to help them, help their owners specifically when they've had specific needs of understanding why their pets are doing certain things, or help their owners with the process of grief of their passing, because sometimes the pets themselves need the owners to be able to let them go. So
Yeah.
That's how it kind of went down that direction.
Do you actually contact pets that have already crossed over? I know there's a lot of people out there who don't believe pets have souls and that sort of thing. I absolutely don't agree with that.
Yeah, I do talk to pets that have crossed over. There are a lot of pet owners who consider these pets that have crossed over to be their family. They are their furry family or
Mm.
their only children. And when they have crossed over, all they want to be able to do is connect to that specific pet to know that they're okay, or to talk about an experience that they went through towards the end of their life, or it's a variety of different things. And they most certainly do come and tell us exactly what's going on with them, and they're very communicative. I have not had an experience yet where a pet that's crossed over does not pop through for their loved ones.
Oh, that's interesting. What's the general reaction from clients when that pet does come over?
It can be a very emotional thing. It's a variety of responses that will be had. Some of it is comfort, some of it is a lot of tears because they are still in the process of healing, because that specific pet was the entire center of their universe. And sometimes it's happiness, and sometimes it's silence. It's just taking it all in, and then later on they communicate what their experience was. But sometimes it can be a very intense emotional thing for a pet owner, or it could be something that's very exciting. It just kind of depends on the circumstance and how the pet passed away.
Transitioning to Akashic records, do pets also have a place in the records?
Yes, they do. They 100% do. I have had a cat that has traveled with me from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And they most certainly are in our Akashic records, because I will see her imprint no matter whether she comes through in one form or another. I can see it in the books trailing all the way through. So, yes.
That's so interesting. So, how did you get into Akashic records work?
When I was younger, I went to a store, and it was a metaphysical store in Oceanside, and they had somebody that decided to come in and do Akashic record readings. And I always thought that was curious because I believed in reincarnation. I always have. Um, and I was curious as to what my experience would be. And she took us into an in depth meditation. And I was able to experience a lifetime where I was very, very young. I had braids, pigtails, and like a black dress with a little white chiffon, uh, almost like a collar. And I had black boots and blue eyes. And I was this little girl that had lost her family to illness. And she had experienced tons of loneliness. And I was able to kind of connect that to certain experiences that I had come across in this life. Not that I didn't have an illness like that in this specific lifetime, um, but I understand a lot about. I understand a lot about the process of sadness and grief and loneliness. And I was able to kind of interconnect it to that specific lifetime, which helped me to understand that whether it's past, present, or future lives, it's all interconnected. Because if we're all living on multiple timelines at the same time, or we're living different experiences, they can be interconnected. And if we don't allow ourselves to release that energy, it can still tie into the current instead of the new experience that we're supposed to be going through. So that's how I found out about the Akashic records.
Is it possible with the idea that time isn't linear, so is it possible that I forgot what I was gonna ask you. I lost my train of thought. Is it possible that you can live 2 lives side by side?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting how we can timeline jump too, from one parallel existence that's going on at the same time as the current that you're in, and we can see the trends where things jump from one space into that space back into our own. Um, it's interesting because I have seen myself on a parallel lifeline that's going on at the same time that this one is, and I'm a very different person, but we've seen each other. So I 100% believe it's possible.
So while I'm living this life as a single girl with a golden retriever, I could, be living in a different dimension with a family and kids.
Yep, 100%.
How many of those lives do you think can exist at once, or can they be counted?
I don't think it can be counted, um, because if we're taking into consideration human lifelines and then other universes and other planets, and I mean, there's just countless amounts of different lifetimes that we could be living within the same existence. So I don't think I can put a number on it for a specific group of people.
How does the Akashic Records relate to the concept of the soul?
Well, if you think about it, before we come into this is just my perspective, before we come into this specific existence, we have contracts that we sign. We decide that we're going to live a certain life experience. And we can choose whether we're going to chase or take other experiences into the current one, or we're going to be able to shift it. And one of the things that I think that the Akashic records from my experiences and from some of my clients' experiences is is that it's important to have access to those, because sometimes when we access those, we're able to kind of change the current pattern of the direction that we're going in if it's not something we want to experience in this life.
So if we signed up for a specific life, for me, I'm single. Chances are I'm probably going to be single the rest of my life, but I chose that path for some kind of reason.
Mhm. It would be that you chose that path for a certain experience. Perhaps you're trying to, as an example, perhaps you're trying to learn to love yourself more and put yourself first. Or there are certain types of experiences that will bring you love in very different forms than you originally anticipated. Um, I think it's a lot about oneself, being able to open oneself and see all the different flavors of life that we can experience and choose what works for us.
What is your process of accessing these records for yourself?
So, my process for that is I go into a meditation, and I will go into my library. Now, the library, the Akashic Records can look like anything. I know that some people have the perspective that it can only be like a library type building. But I have had clients that have gone into spaceships that are their libraries. I have had clients that go outdoors and commune with nature, and there's their library, and that's where their books appear. Um, it really is dependent on each individual person. For me, mine is an actual physical library, but the There's very Greek art, artistic things in there, and there is a place where my books can be placed. And so I go into that, and I do ask for my guides and my ancestors to help me go ahead and access the information I need. There is someone, an energetic being, a spirit, that helps me with those things when I go into that space. So I will say I would like to look at this specific lifetime, or I would like to be shown a lifetime that has had this specific experience to understand why my life is going in this direction. And then really look at it and see if I need to release any old energy from that space. And if I do, then I release any cords, and I have my guides, my ancestors, my teachers, and the universe just help me to go through that process to where we're able to go to the next step and focus on what's needed. Or sometimes you can access the Akashic records to help you, even in instances like career. So let's say that you want to be a nurse, and you have self-confidence issues with being a nurse, and you know in a past life that you were able to pass the test that you needed to pass. You can go into the Akashic records and search for it and find, oh, this is the lifetime and this is how I did it in that life. See if it actually worked for you and see if it'll work with you in the current. And I've done that for myself before. I'm not a nurse, but I have been able to access it to help me overcome specific traumas that I have undergone so that I can do better for myself in the future. So the Akashic Records is there's a wide way of being able to use it, but that's how I access it.
So, one of the things that I've read on the Akashic Records with the library, it's really interesting concept that you said we kind of paint our own idea of what the storage room looks like or what the library looks like. And I think it was Dolores Canyon, maybe, who wrote about hers was a giant like wall cloth or something that was woven. And so certain pieces that she needed at that particular time would kind of glisten. So she knew to look in that spot. It's really interesting how she wrote about that. But essentially, what you're telling me is that through the Akashic Records, we have the keys to design our own paths.
Yes, I 100% fully believe that.
Hmm. How do these shape our understanding of our past lives in reincarnation? Is this something that, what am I trying to ask? Um, when we reincarnate over and over, is there a specific lesson that we're signing up that we have to learn? And if we don't learn that, we have to keep coming back?
Well, that's the thing. I have heard of the concept of you have to re-experience that life over and over again until you get it, but I really believe that we have choice in the matter. I don't have the belief that you have to keep repeating things. You can choose to come back and learn that experience again until you fully get it, but I don't think it's something that as a soul we are obligated to do.
Do you know any of the history of how the idea of Akashic Records started?
Hmm.
Um, Super interesting. Joe Fox says it's a super interesting topic tonight. Well, how far back does this Akashic Records go? Is it
The
from
beginning of
Egyptian
time.
days? From the
The
beginning of
beginning of
time?
time. From the beginning
Has
of time.
man
I Go ahead.
has man always known about that?
I think that one of the very first people that I understand um, really dove into it was Edgar Casey. And I think that that's just one of the first written people, but I think that people from all over the world have accessed it in different ways, have called it different things. But from the visions that I have had, it's been here since the beginning of time. We've just had different names for it.
Is there a process for, is it almost like hypnotizing a client when they come to you and they want to access their records for a specific problem that they're having in their life?
Well, hypnosis is a little bit, this is where I have a difference of opinion on it because I do hypnotherapy as well, but it's different because
Mhm.
you're going into, with the Akashic records, you're going into a peaceful state of mind, and then you're going into the Akashic records through access points that someone who is guiding you will ask you certain questions about beforehand so that they bring you into a space of comfort so that you can actually find that specific location. Hypnosis is different in the context of you're not being well, hypnotherapy is not about being controlled either. You have power of choice in that situation as well, but it's it's different because with hypnotherapy, you're looking, a lot of the time you're looking to change things in the context of like certain habits. It kind of depends on um, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. With Akashic records, it's a meditation. You're not looking at a clock that's moving back and forth, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. It does. So when a client does come to you, with a specific problem, what do you do to access those records?
So what I will do is I will ask them what specific experiences they have been having in this current that they're questioning about specific past lives. And then I will take them to the Akashic records through a guided meditation, and I'll ask them specific questions, and I'll have them view the records for themselves, and I'll take notes. Or if they just want me to dive in, because there are two different ways that I do this, or they want me to just dive in, then I don't take them into the meditation. I go to their guides, their ancestors, and their teachers, and I go to their records and I have them show me what needs to be seen in order to help a person understand where the problem is sourcing from, why it's stemming into the current life that they're dealing with, and how they can go about releasing it through. Usually, cord removals are a big thing for that. But sometimes it can also be practical things as well. It can be counseling. It can be a variety of different things that they can do that are practical while you're still on a spiritual level releasing those things as well.
Are there any risks associated with accessing these records? Like, say someone's untrained and they're going in there and accessing these records.
I would state that it would be good to get some training before you dive in and take somebody else into those situations because some of these past lives can be super traumatic. And if you don't know how to specifically guide the person back into a peaceful state, it can be very disruptive in the context of their current lifetime, but also you're not really accomplishing your goal at that specific time by just taking them in and allowing them to experience everything. Because sometimes when you go into a specific life and something very traumatic has happened in that life, if you're not trained, you don't know how to, kind of guide them with a protective perspective of like, I am safe when I'm going into
Mhm.
this and I'm just viewing, I'm not experiencing it all over again. So, training is important.
Does the same rules apply to other spirit beings? Do they have an Akashic records as well?
I believe they do. But as far as how they are trained, they're going to be trained differently than we are. It's based on their universal timeline and what they're specifically experiencing in that specific experience. So yes, they have guidelines as well. Do they always honor it? No. But the same goes everywhere, you know. Um, but the hope is, yeah, I mean, they have different ways of training. I have gone into meditations where, and I've had dreams where, like, I'm in classes where they are teaching different ways of being able to access the Akashic records um, and it's through the way that their your universal timeline works and what is comfortable within their specific boundaries. So the answer is yes, but they don't always honor it, just like we don't always honor it, but we should.
What about people who are reincarnated that carry some kind of trauma from their past life into this life?
So yes, it does exist. What's the question about it?
I guess, how do you go about changing that record or learning what you need to do to kind of change? Sorry, my cat is,
Hi, kitty.
he wants to be on camera too. He's got questions.
Hi,
Um,
sweetheart.
I guess, say, like, there's a little boy's story that I know of. Supposedly he was in World War II and came down in a plane, and he remembers it and is able to tell the plane and everything. He's like 5 years old. It's
Mhm.
obviously a past life. So does this play any kind of role into his life now? Is there a way to
Well,
kind of shut off the past so that he can move forward?
so yes, in the context of, let's say that somebody has had that traumatic past life experience, there is a way to you go into that energetic. This is where having somebody with Akashic Records experience helps, because then you can go into that space. Sorry, excuse me, and release those cords from that lifetime to help you focus on the present and work on your healing from that life so that you can focus on this specific one. Um, in those kinds of experiences where they are very traumatic, sometimes working with a spiritual teacher or mentor who understands those kinds of things when it comes to reincarnating and remembering those can really help as well, because they can give you step by step guides as to how to be more at peace with what happened then and allow yourself to be in the present now. But cord releasing definitely helps with that process.
Got it. That's interesting. What about if you don't like the contract that you got yourself into and you want to change it?
So um, you can go ahead and change it in certain aspects. It may not be in all aspects, because when we go into our contracts and we go back and we look at what we agree to. Let's say in this lifetime, I am a teacher, but that's not something that I really wanted to be. I wanted to be an astronaut. Well, I can go in there and look at why I made the agreement to be a teacher in the first place, and then assess whether or not, like, it's really helping me with my current lifeline to be an astronaut, and what steps I would need to take, because there's the practical side of it as well. um, and then if you're able to sit down with your guides, your teachers and ancestors, and they state, we'll be able to help you with this process, but these are the steps you're going to have to take, then you would need to take those specific steps. Now, there are certain experiences that within our contracts I've noticed that we sign up for that we don't end up budging it. Like, this is a no budge experience. This is something I need to experience. And so you would need to wait until the next lifetime to be able to change that. But it is dependent on the individual soul that is communicating with their team, their guides.
How does this work on a collective level? I know right now we have a lot of stuff going on in the world. We have wars, we have election coming up. How how can this contribute, or how can we gain insight and healing on a collective level using the Akashic records?
So going into the Akashic records can be a collective experience as well. So tapping in energetically by connecting with the current universal line and looking at the matrix and how we're experiencing things and asking specific questions can help us to understand that a little bit better. Um, it's it's kind of interesting because we can look at okay, let me explain something.
It's a deep
I
question, I know.
Yeah, because I have this is my personal viewpoint on things through my own, meditations and work. What we are experiencing is very real for our current timeline, right? For what
Mhm.
we're going through. However, um, I feel that we can go into the Akashic records and understand why we're going through that experience by communicating with, the universe and being able to talk with our guides and ancestors and even people who existed before on this plane that have gone through those wars and experiences to understand why we are going through what we are going through. Um, but I don't think that with what's going on right now, because I've gone into meditation because I'm very like confused as to why we're dealing with what we're dealing with in our world right
Mm.
now.
I think we all
And
are right now.
and this is going to be the craziest answer, but this is what I was told. I was specifically told that each individual person is going to make an impact in their universe and in their world around them. We can't change anything that's currently going on that level. It's part of the contract that's already been pre agreed upon. That's one of those no budge situations so that we can experience growth in a very different way.
Mhm.
The messages that I have received personally are we need to focus on what we can do as individuals and then collectively come together and try to continue to work towards change. But right now, with what's currently going on in our world, it's creating a shift to open up more doorways for growth in ways that we have never experienced before. And that's why we're going through it.
It's really interesting. I kinda wanna shift gears just a little bit. With paranormal investigating, I know we've been on a couple investigations together in some of the most haunted locations.
Yes, we have.
Um, how does these hauntings play a part with the Akashic records? And what I mean by this, for instance, the I don't know why the name escapes me right now. The Manson murder house, the Tate house. So there's been multiple EVPs with that house, with Sharon Tate's voice. There's one of the other guys that was her friends. You hear him in there. I think he was a barber. I forget his name. His name is escaping me as well. But is this some sort of dimensional,
Well, again,
sort of
this
like a
this is
parallel universe kind of thing? Go ahead.
it's a parallel universe situation because we are picking up on what is going on in that current those moments in time that are reoccurring in the current that they're in, and that's why we're able to pick those up.
So when you come across a spirit who is distraught, I don't want to say mentally because they're not in spirit anymore, but I guess spiritually would be the correct word for it, where they feel like it's one of those situations where you have to wake them up to move them on or kind of help them in some way. It's almost as if you're a ghost counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is happening there on the Akashic record side? Do you meet somebody that passed away a long time ago as a medium that for whatever reason it's overlapping and you're tapping into?
Sometimes, there was a house that I went to where there were spirits that felt like they were stuck there. Specifically, a little girl about age 9. She had the most beautiful curly hair I've ever seen and brilliant eyes, but she felt stuck because her parents, she said she couldn't find her parents anywhere. And it was interesting because I did go into the Akashic records at that time, and I did see that specifically that this girl has already moved on, has is in a new reincarnation in a new existence, and is no longer in that specific situation. Um, and that we were dealing with what would be like I'm not going to say this term right, but like a remember, what do they call it? The We're seeing a snippet of what happened in that specific time, but it's not in the current
Yeah,
existence
it's like
in
a
that life.
I always call them like flashes. That's what I call them because I see those a lot.
Yeah. And then
It's
there
like a
have been
recording. It's like a recording
yeah,
that plays again.
yeah. And then in other situations with the paranormal, it's quite the opposite. It is going on um, in that specific soul's experience over and over and over again because they haven't been able to move on or release that situation, and they haven't reincarnated and they haven't gone through that whole process. And the Akashic records can show, yes, they are stuck in that situation and there are things we can do to help. So it's really about tapping into that energy and seeing, is this something that's a reoccurring memory that we're tapping into, or is this something that's current, that's going on with this spirit, with this soul that exists um, in that lifeline, and they don't see a way out to be able to move forward? So, yeah, you can definitely use the Akashic records when looking at those situations as well.
How do we how do we as a soul remain whole when there's pieces of us all interdimensional like that through time and
Okay,
space?
so this is where it gets
That's a
like
deep
super
question.
trippy. Yeah.
I'll stop asking the deep questions.
No, I love the deep questions. Keep them coming because you're making me really think too. It's a great thing. Um, to answer your question is we are whole. No matter what experiences we are going through, we are never in little pieces, in my experience. We go through different experiences, but that doesn't determine us as a whole soul or a non-whole soul.
Got it. That's a really good answer. So when someone says that they've lost a piece of themselves, to some extent, that's not true,
It's
right?
not necessarily true. Yeah, I would say it's more like, in some senses, they're learning new things about themselves. They're finding new gateways of like, oh, this is where my wholeness comes from. And I didn't want to go through that experience. The experience could have been absolutely horrifying, horrible, but it's helped me to develop and open up this gateway. And so, in even though your letting go of an experience, and that experience may be extremely painful, that does not take away from your soul unless you allow it to.
Got it. Can you share any personal experiences or stories where accessing the Akashic records has a really profound impact on someone's life or a client's without giving away their name and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. I won't give her name, but there is this incredible woman who is also a very dear friend of mine that really was battling with severe loneliness and depression. And her brother had some issues with addictions. And I'm trying to be cautious as to how I present this just because I want to protect her.
Right.
Um, but her brother dealt with some serious addictions. And um, he kept trying to pull himself out of those addictions, but he would end up tumbling right back in, and it would be worse than the very first experience. So she asked me to go ahead and do a private session with them. And the reason I'm able to share this is because I do have her permission. Um, but we went in and we found out that they had been married in a past life, and there was abusive tendencies between the two of them. And he had those same problems with those specific addictions that sourced from abuse that occurred for him. And so we really had to go in deep and release those cords because it was occurring lifetime after lifetime after lifetime to where they were both trying to save each other in different ways. And the lesson that was to be learned is that they weren't necessarily meant to save each other. They were meant to be present in each other's lives and show support. But it was important for them to be able to find the power to stand alone by themselves and show themselves that they could specifically process through that pain. And I'm more focused on the brother in that situation. With the woman, the lovely woman I'm speaking about, she learned that she couldn't save him every time he fell. He had to stand up on his own because she was very family oriented. Um, and it was really hard for her because she was pretty much the person who took care of all of the family members. She was the oldest, and when they were young, they had to really, really go through hard experiences to where she had to grow up extremely fast. And so, with diving in, releasing those cords, and then coming out of that space, like it was just like there was a huge heart healing between the two of them, but they also took the steps to get proper care. They went into counseling, and the he was able to go ahead and not repeat the same systematic thing of addiction because he found out within that past life, because his father was abusive, he was able to realize that's not the current anymore, and I'm only doing this to myself. I have to make better decisions for myself. So he did go on to go ahead and get help he needed. And then my beautiful friend has just evolved in her metaphysical capacities and capabilities to where she is at a point now where she's trying to help others that are dealing with similar experiences. And that's how her self empowerment has kind of evolved and put her in a place where the Akashic records from that specific lifetime, it's no longer affecting either of them, and they're seeing positive progression forward.
Is there a overall goal for the entire universe, like universal, collectively with the Akashic records to are we all supposed to um, grow to a certain point on a collective level?
I think the Akashic records are there for the experiences that we have gone through, are going through, and will be going through. But I don't think that the Akashic records is there to determine a certain point of growth of like where we're done, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Um, I feel that it's a record of everything that we've ever experienced, will experience, have experienced, um, and that it continues to grow. But I don't think it has, and I do look at it as a living being of sorts. But I don't think that it has that specific like, okay, you're done. Um, I think it's more so we choose when we're done with those experiences.
So then what happens? Do we go on to we just stop the reincarnating? Where do we go?
Well, there are different perspectives on that. I think that for me to say that a person is going to go in a specific place would not be correct because each individual's soul experience may be a different kind of system of belief. Some believe that they'll go to heaven. Some believe that they'll be a part of the stars. They'll be a part of the universe again. Or that, there's just a variety of different opinions. And for me to put one perspective on it would be unfair to the collective. What I
Mhm.
will state that I personally feel with my own thought process is that when we're done learning, we have the capacity of being able to help others and teach others, um, and be guides for others. Or we may choose to do other things once we're done. It just kind of depends. And I don't think that we have all the answers.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you're right. Have you
yeah.
seen that movie, What Dreams May Come?
Yes, I love
It's one
that
of my
movie.
favorite movies, but I think it's very much like that where we paint our own destiny and story as we go, you know?
100%. Yeah.
For those who've never seen that movie, go watch that. It's probably one of the best films out there dealing with reincarnation and life after death, and it's just a great film. But, Raven, so many more questions, but what are you doing these days? I know you're teaching classes, you're doing a lot of
Yes.
readings.
So, I am working with different paranormal teams throughout the US, which is kind of fun. As a medium, I'm also doing Akashic record readings, I'm doing pet readings. I am a teacher for Magic U, which is ran by Patty Negri and
Mhm.
Father Sebastian, and they have some pretty amazing classes, a lot of really cool teachers. And then I'm also doing independent classes through the Desert Medium LLC that I'm teaching independently.
And where could people find you if they want to take a class or get a reading from you?
So, Facebook, you would go to the Desert Medium LLC group. Um, Please make sure to answer the questions so that you can be accepted in there. TikTok, it's the Desert Medium Ravenwolf. Yeah, the Desert Medium Ravenwolf. Instagram, it's the Desert Medium LLC. You can also email me at the desertmedium@gmail.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me right now if you're looking for a private session.
Well, Raven, it's always a delight to have you on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love talking about the Akashic records, and your questions were awesome.
You know what? I have a couple friends that listen to the show a lot, and they're always telling me, "Your questions are too deep."
No, no, I think it's important to ask those questions because someone out there is going to ask the question themselves. And even for the people that you end up bringing onto the show, if they don't know the answer, that's something that they can seek out or dive into deeper and be like, oh, I'm not really sure about that. Let me research it and get back to you.
Well, Raven, we are out of time. So I'm going to have you back on again to talk about the pet stuff,
Wonderful.
pet psychic stuff. And I definitely want to have you back on for another project as well. So we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to The Gateway, your portal to the unexplained and mystical and otherworldly, broadcast live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans. I just got home from New Orleans. Find me online or on social media to find out the latest in books and artwork created by me at www.clthomas.org. Until next time.